Well, hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne, welcoming you to my channel. Thanks for finding me in this crowded orchid world here on YouTube. Now here I try to grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids in Melbourne here in Australia without any help from greenhouses or grow lights or humidifiers or any equipment, really just me and them, inside, outside, or not at all. I just don't have the time for any fuss or malarkey, plant lovers, so they sound like your conditions. Do hit subscribe because I post every week on a Friday. And in my endless ramblings, plant lovers, you may have heard me mention that it's a great idea to join an orchid club or group or organization or whatever it's called in your area, because that is the best way to figure out what other people can grow successfully in your area, which might not be obvious, how they grow it, and to meet people who can share their knowledge but also share their plants. Because orchid groups tend to have a sale once or twice a year at each meeting, which is often monthly. There'll be people trading, selling plants. And at one of my orchid groups that I belong to, the Orchid Species Society of Victoria, I'll put the link below, they have a raffle every meeting. And it's, I don't know, what is it? It's $3 or $2 or something for 6 tickets, 3 tickets, whatever it might be. That particular group meets the second Monday of every month, and it's obviously dedicated to species orchids. I assiduously enter the raffle, of course, because the growers there have some amazing things, and their sale, which they have twice a year, is incredible, and I've made several videos about those, which I'll link up here. But the raffle's obviously a bit random because you never know what you're going to get, and I went along last week because some of the members had been on a trip to Borneo, climbing up to some of the higher altitude mountains where there are cooler growing amazing orchids. And I was just fascinated to see that. And so there was a raffle and I won first one and then second. Amazing. There they are, untagged. Luckily, of course, I was able to get the names from the growers, and they are Bulbophyllum flavescens and Bulbophyllum lasiochilum. And this is the darker form. And in fact, I've just noticed there's a flower bud just there, and I'm loath to cut it off, although I probably should, because look, it's just a little sniplet. So plant lovers, if you have needed any more reasons why you should try and find an orchid club near you, Exhibit A, Exhibit B, 2 amazing plants you'd never find that I got in the raffle for the princely sum, I think literally of $2. So you have found your club, and here's a little bit of help perhaps into how you might find them. In Melbourne, for example, there is an Orchid Society Council of Victoria umbrella group, which lists all the local clubs and groups and when they meet. And I think in most states, I'm pretty sure New South Wales, and I know there's one in South Australia too, there are these umbrella organisations which list each sort of regional, suburban club, their meeting times, contact details, etc. I would imagine in most other parts of the world, there's going to be umbrella orchid organisations that will then tell you perhaps local clubs that might be near you. So just do some creative Googling, orchid group near me, orchid society near me, and just see what you can find out. If not, try and find if there's a national orchid society in your country, which there probably might be. Contact them and just say, have you got a list of all the local clubs in the country, in the region, or whatever, or my state, and see if you can find out some information there. Worst case scenario is many of these organizations might have Zoom meetings and or a lot of online resources where you can read articles or see videos about other meetings and care tips. So I think no matter where you are, there's going to be some way that you can connect to other orchid growers, which is what I promptly did and was very excited. Now, the funny thing was that at the raffle, there was only a few sort of prepared plants. So one of the members, who was the president, had this amazing Bulbophyllum in bloom, which was on the display bench. And he just got a pair of scissors and cut off a snipping for me. So generous and extraordinary. Very happy about that. Anyway, so first thing is then you get these plants. How do you know what to do with them? Obviously, in my case, the growers were there, so I know that both of these are grown cold. And here that means outside, undercover, but with no heating, which is exactly my conditions. I don't have a greenhouse or a shade house. And in fact, a lot of the members of that club grow their orchids under the eaves of their house or under trees. So even less kind of ambient conditions than me, which is always reassuring because you think, well, if they can grow amazing plants to bloom, I certainly can. And interestingly, if you look at both of the descriptors of these orchids, they are described as warmer growing. So it's great to hear that, no, they can do well in my climate. Okay, So let's just say, like me, you've got these orchids. Now, I had no idea what they were. You do a quick Google, and the site that I always go to for species orchids is orchidspecies.com, which I'll put along here. Now there, you'll get a sense of where the orchid comes from and its altitude. Is it a cool, warm, intermediate, hot grower, etc., when it flowers, and perhaps if it has a dormancy period. Sometimes. Now, of course, there are lots of orchid species in the world, so not everything's going to be there information-wise, and it can be pretty broad stroke and generic, but it's a good start and a good place to begin. Then for me, the next thing I would do is have a look at the Orchid Society Council of Victoria's website, because they have a whole raft of articles written by people in my city who grow orchids, and I'll put the link to that below. It's an amazing resource. I think no matter where you are in the world, you might find it interesting and useful. So then you find out what these plants like and how they like to be grown. Now this one, for example, was being grown on, I think it was grown on a mount, and this one was just in this little pot, so I don't know how the grower is actually growing this, but you often get a sense from the person who's growing it how they grow it. But of course, that isn't the only way. You can make your own decisions about how to actually pot and grow something depending on what's going to work for you. So you've done your research, you go to orchidspecies.com, and there you go. Now the other thing you might be fortunate to have is a library. And plant lovers, I do. So I've got two books here. This one, and it's ironic that we've got Bulbophyllums here, because I made a video quite recently because I just decided I had to have a particular orchid, a Bulbophyllum, which I bought on eBay. I mean, ridiculous, because the only one I've ever got to bloom is this beauty, Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry, which I think anyone can get to flower. It is the easiest houseplant in the world. It just likes household conditions, nothing special, no humidity dealings, nothing. You just grow it and it blooms. Amazing flowers, don't last long, flowers once a year, but they are incredible. The other Bulbophyllum I have, which has never flowered for me, is this one, which is Bulbophyllum tigridum. And this grows in, I think, Hong Kong. And I was growing it just inside, and it would grow and produce new bulbs and was as happy as Larry. It never flowered. So this summer I decided to put it outside in sort of bright indirect light, where, I don't know, it seems okay, but now we're getting into the cooler autumn weather. I've just bought it inside. So never flowered for me. It's a bit of a lithophyte in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong, you know, that's a subtropical climate, and I think this grows in quite harsh conditions. So I haven't got this right. I've tried more light, less light, more warmth, less warmth. Who knows, plant lovers anyway. You know, sometimes with these things, you just give up and shove it in a corner, and then suddenly it goes ping, and it will live its best life. But until that point, not holding my breath for that one. So I am keen to find interesting Bulbophyllums that do work well in my cooler conditions, because I am not going to grow warm ones, which a lot of them are. So Bulbophyllum is the largest genus in the orchid family. They are everywhere, literally. I had no idea. So there are Bulbophyllums in Australia, through Southeast Asia, across into mainland Asia, in Africa, and in Central and Southern America. So that's a pretty broad spread. Apparently, though, the epicenter of diversification is Papua New Guinea, which is just north of Australia. So that kind of makes sense that there's some in Australia as well. And given that breadth of distribution, of course, there's going to be 1,000,001 growing conditions, climates and environments that they love and thrive in. But they do seem to be mostly in that equatorial band, but obviously some will be higher altitude and so can take cooler temperatures, and they're the ones I've been trying to find. So first book, The Orchids of Asia. This is a new purchase for me. I found this in the Royal Melbourne Botanic Gardens has a book sale every year, the Friends Society, and this book was in it, and it was ridiculous. It was like $2 or something. The great thing is about Mark L. Isaac Williams, who produced this book, is that he has photographed only plants in situ, so they're not in botanic gardens or pot culture collections. And the Bulbophyllums, as you can see, there are really great photographs of the plants in situ, so you can get a real sense of how these particular ones are growing that he has photographed. Obviously these are Asian ones because the book is about Asian orchids, but you can kind of get a sense. Low-ish light, lots of humidity, lots of moisture seem to be pretty consistent. Anyway, that is this book, but we have more specific details about those two species in this one. This is kind of the dictionary of Bulbophyllums. The trick is with books, of course, is that they become out of date very quickly because new orchids are discovered and the name changes. But anyway, even if the name changes, you can find the older name and you'll still find the details in a book like this, which is called Bulbophyllums and Their Allies, and it's by Emily S. Siegerist. There we are. So Bulbophyllum flavescens, this one grows in low altitudes in Malaya, Sumatra, Java, Borneo and the Philippines. Cultivation much the same as others in the section. Warm temperatures, some shade, lots of moisture, except that pots or baskets could be used successfully instead of slabs. So I'm going to pot mine in this little terracotta pot. A lot of Bulbophyllums, like Elizabeth Ann, you can see here, very rhizomy and tangly, and so they do really well on slabs or tree fern slabs or pieces of wood. However, Emily says it does well in a pot, so in a pot it will go. It's a nice plant to have as it doesn't outgrow the pot too quickly and has a pleasant display of flowers with only minimum attention from the grower. That sounds great. However, they do not have as pleasant a fragrance as some of the others in this section. Some Bulbophyllums, as we have said in the past, only a mother could love, and the smell only a mother probably understands and can deal with, just saying. Teenage boy is the descriptor that I use for Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry. Just to recap, I love etymology. Bulbophyllum comes from the Greek bulbos, meaning bulb, phylon, meaning leaf, because they tend to have quite bulbous pseudobulbs and quite large fleshy leaves. Now, flavescens is derived from the Latin flavus, which means yellow or blonde. So guess what? Yes, it has yellow flowers. Now, it probably wouldn't have been something I would have chosen per se, but it was a $2 raffle orchid, and so I'm going to give it a good Aussie go at growing this. And although it does describe it as being a warmer grower and from a lower altitude, it is grown here by the person I got it from successfully outdoors. So I'm going to give it a go and see if I can get it to survive and thrive and flower outside. So we're going to repot this in a minute. And then our next one, Bulbophyllum lasiochilum, there we go. Now this one is from Myanmar, Thailand and Malaya. Adapts well to culture on a tree fern in warm conditions with daily waterings and frequent fertilization. But as I said, the person who I got this from grows his cold here in Melbourne. So it's not warm. I mean, it is in summer, but certainly not in winter at night. It is an easily grown small species and highly recommended for the collection. Now there is a point here that the flowers are dark purple, but there is an attractive variation that is pale yellow. And I know that this is the darker flowering version. And lasiochilum means lasio, furry lip. So if you look at the picture of the flower, you can see it's actually got quite furry fur around the lip of the flower. Interesting point, someone did ask me why I don't drop in pictures of flowers of plants I've just got. Now, I can use my own images in YouTube videos, but I can't use external ones largely unless they're unlicensed. And to try and find an unlicensed picture of a particular flower will take too much time, to be honest, plant lovers. So it's a copyright issue. I can only use my own images. Well, I choose to. So if something hasn't bloomed for me, there is no picture, but you will have to Google it, and that's your homework. All right, so we're going to do a very quick potting video. First thing is, of course, tags. Neither of these had labels, but I got the names from the grower. Now, lasiochilum, as the book says, loves to sort of ramble. You can see it's quite rhizomy with each bulb producing roots. So it's going to be one of those sort of spreaders and clingers. Not a massive plant though, not like say a Sologeny, which can be enormous. So I've got these little wooden panels with a basket attached, which I've lined with a bit of coconut fiber and sphagnum moss, and I put in here actually some out of the bag orchid mix because it's a bit gritty, because this is going to be very free draining and I just want to make it a bit more of a nook. So I'm literally just going to bury some of those roots in here and allow it to form a tangled mass, cling to the wood and sort of mass itself around there. And in that mixture, I am going to put a little bit of slow release orchid fertilizer. And as it says in the book, I am going to liquid fertilize it, but not in winter, but during the growing season. So a little diluted solution. So that's how we're going to pot this one. And then flavescens, as the book suggests, I'm going to put it in a little terracotta pot. So I'm going to swing the camera around and we're just going to do that right now. First things first, writing the label. You all need to know I am the worst speller in the world as well. Okay, so here's my little container for lasiochilum. So I'm just going to take off a little bit of that medium that I popped in there. Now I'm just going to pop the little we could call it a cutting, I suppose, in there, tuck in some of those roots, and then just put back the bark and the medium and just gently cover it like that. There we go. And of course the rather large tag, but never mind, pop that in there like that. And then just a little bit of slow release orchid fertilizer. Not quite the season as it's autumn, but anyway, we'll put a little bit of that in there like that. There we go. So now I'll give that a good drench and put it somewhere that is in direct light, not too bright. Okay, next there's our little pot. Of course you could drill that, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm curious to see what's going on inside this. I think it's a new division. Let's have a look. There we go. Yeah, it's just been plonked in sphagnum moss. That's fine. In fact, that sphagnum is fine. So there we go. Quite a vigorous little root system on this baby. So you can see how easy it is to divide it. Can you see the rhizome here? And each pseudobulb is producing roots, but in fact it's sort of rooted all the way along. So a very easy plant to take divisions of, as you can see. So obviously I need to get those roots fairly far down in that pot. So I'm going to use some sphagnum in the base, and then I'm just using medium bark for this one, and I'm putting the orchid in, and then I'm mixing the bark and the sphagnum moss, and the sphagnum is just going to help retain some moisture, and the bark is going to help keep the pot free draining. So terracotta is great in that it can retain a little bit of moisture in the pot. The pot absorbs it, so it keeps it available to the plant. It drains quickly. It does evaporate, but of course in summer that can be a negative because it does evaporate quite quickly. Also, terracotta doesn't get as hot as black plastic, and it is just more environmentally friendly. So there we go. So we've got a nice mix of sphagnum for a bit of moisture retention, and a nice bit of bark for those roots to get their teeth into. There we go. That's that. And then we're just going to put in another little few grains of our slow release orchid fertilizer like that. And then, most importantly, our label. And there we go. So there we are, plant lovers. Raffle prize Bulbophyllums. I have no luck with Bulbophyllums apart from Elizabeth and Buckleberry, as I've said, but I'm here to challenge that paradigm and find things that do really work for me. And another good idea, on the back of your tags, you can just write the date when you reposted it. Now, I luckily have my YouTube videos to remind me of exactly when I repotted things, but it is a good idea. Then you can keep tabs of how old your medium is and when you think you should repot something. I am excited to see quite what happens with these, and I will keep you very much in the loop as to every twist and turn in my Bulbophyllum story. But plant lovers, as we've said, moral of the story, find an orchid club near you where you too can find raffle ticket orchids for $2. Perhaps not, but you never know. A great place to find like-minded orchid enthusiasts, to find plants and to find an opportunity to learn about things that you might not think should work in your environment. That's the great thing about meeting a grower. They all share their tips and tricks. And I'm here to share my tips and tricks next week. So if you're curious as to what might be going on, hit subscribe. I post every week on a Friday, as I said. Amateur ramblings, a lot of dead ends, particularly with Bulbophyllums. Quite a few of mine have ended up on the compost heap, apart from our champion, Elizabeth and Buckleberry. So plant lovers, I hope all's well in your world, that your Bulbophyllums are doing very well if that's your thing, and I look forward to seeing you next week.